Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals. The title of this evening's show is Videographer Geoff Holland, and he sits next to me here and waiting patiently for the cameras to start rolling because he has so much to say. He's quite an interesting man in a lot of ways. Thank you. How you feeling right now?
Very good, and thank you so much for hosting me.
Are you relaxed?
I think so. I hope so.
How come you're relaxed and I'm tense?
Good question.
That's always a thing for me when a show first starts. I need a few seconds to loosen up, stretch. Anyhow, as you viewers out there know, my shows always have two major segments. The first segment is Who Are You segment, where I talk to Geoff about who he is personally, so you get an idea where he's coming from and how it is he says what he says about things that we'll be talking about. There's a whole bunch of things here with my questions I'm going to be going through and asking Geoff. But first I'm going to talk to him about who he is personally. And your full name is what?
Jeffrey B. Holland, Holland.
Full name is a B, your middle name is
Barnaby is my middle name.
You like that?
I'm the only one I know that ever had that middle name.
Me too. I like it. Yeah. I have a trick question I ask my guests. Do you want to have your trick question now or later on?
Sure. Yes.
If I were to ask your best friend, who is Geoff? What would your best friend say? What would he or she do it the first person? Geoff is what?
Reasonably intelligent, intense sometimes, focused on what he cares about. Mm-hmm. I think that's basically. I know who would say that right off the top of my head.
You can see it if you want to or not.
Yeah.
All right. And when and where were you born?
Waterville, Maine.
Maine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was I'm a baby boomer. I was born after the war. My father came home for the war, and I was the firstborn afterwards. So I'm of that generation. I don't necessarily relate to a lot of what my generation has sort of directed for the world, but anyway, that's where I come from.
All right. Anything significant about your national or cultural heritage?
Not really. I'm just like a lot of people in this country, French Canadian on one side and a little Scotch and German on the other.
If I would ask you a question that you don't want to answer, you can tell me I don't want to answer that or whatever.
Okay.
So, do you have a religious preference nowadays?
No. I was actually raised, my formative years were in Kansas, which is very conservative. And I spent quite a bit of my early years sort of processing that and figuring out how it worked in terms of what I really saw life was about. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid,
were you some kind of a Christian or not?
The family was Methodist, and
I come from
and
a
I
Catholic
went to church. I went to Sunday school like a lot of young people back then. But when I got to university, I started to question a lot of what that was about, and particularly when I started reading Rachel Carson and Parler, like The Population Bomb, and learn about biodiversity. I took a lot of science.
Are you a tree hugger?
I guess I have to say that. Yeah.
That's up.
Yeah, not obsessive, but yes.
Yeah. You mentioned education. Tell me a little about your formal education.
Well, I got a degree actually in business after and then I went into the service. I was in Germany for a couple of years with the Army, and when I got out, I did graduate work at the University of Washington in the sciences. Huh. And after that, I sort of spent a number of years just trying to determine what direction I wanted to go. And ultimately it led me into doing the media work that I started doing in the 90s to try to make a difference on the things that concerned me.
So you got a number of years doing media work.
Yes.
To make a difference. Why would you want to make a difference?
Well, because I think, to be honest, I think we're headed for a cliff. I mean, the world is in a lot of trouble, and you wouldn't know it by what you see in the media and the signals that we get from through the culture, and things like population. When I was born, the population was about 2.5 billion, and now it's 7.25 billion.
Just the other day I coined a new word, and I looked it up and I didn't find it listed in the dictionary anywhere. Species-side.
Species-side?
Species-side, like suicide, homicide, genocide.
Yeah, you wonder about that, don't you? I mean, it seems like
that makes sense.
We're like lemmings heading for the cliff, you know. It's very distressing when you take the time to really understand the dynamics at work. You've got 7.25 billion people on the planet right now. Every year we're adding about 75 million more people. That's a net plus.
Yeah.
And if you say the city of Seattle, for instance, I think, what is it, 5 million people, something like that in the Seattle area. We're talking 15 cities the size of Seattle that we add to the world population every year. And every one of those people requires shelter, food, water, and they're all going to have ambition. And the planet is a finite resource. I mean, there's only so much that the planet can give.
We'll get into that further in the second half of the show. Let's talk about you personally a little more. Do you have a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend? Or?
Yes, my wife, Jenny. We've been married for 12 years.
12 years. Has she found out about you yet?
She knows. She puts up with me, though. I'm very fortunate that way.
Any children or grandchildren?
No, we don't have children. Actually, that's part of that is because of I just didn't want to bring children into the world. And I felt like it would be better for me to use my energy to try to
make it a better place.
Yeah, make the world a better place. And I didn't want to leave children to have to deal with the kind of issues that they may have to deal with.
Yeah, but then again, I'm kind of provocative sometimes. With what you just said, it makes me a little nervous because I'm the 12th child. Now, what if Mama and Papa had said, well, we're going to stop at 10 or 11? I wouldn't be here looking at you.
Yes, I realize that. And there are a lot of issues that come up when you start talking about this. This is why population is such a difficult thing, and why it's so difficult in general conversation to even talk about it, because people just aren't comfortable dealing with it.
All right. How about your political persuasion? Need we say a little more about where I sense you are? Left, right, centrist, or what?
I call myself a progressive.
Progressive?
Yes. I think that's progress is where that comes from, and I think we need to be focused on moving ourselves in a proper direction, and there are answers for most of the challenges that we have if we make the right choices.
Sure. Have you supported the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? Or
no,
what?
I'm not a member of either one. Well, actually, I take that back. I am a registered Democrat, but I basically, and I guess maybe you want to talk about this later, but I think that the whole system has become egregiously compromised by money.
Yes.
It's a serious issue, and actually that's where my focus is primarily now, is trying to be a sort of a positive force in that regard.
Sure. All right. Any memberships in political, social, or civic organizations that the viewers would be interested in? Where do you belong to? Any organizations?
I'm a board member of a foundation, the Dancing Star Foundation in California, and the focus is on animal rights and biodiversity protection. And actually, it's bigger than that, but I would say that's really, I'm not much of a joiner. I really try to keep my own direction, and but that's something I've been involved with for quite some time, and it's a wonderful organization, and glad to be a part of it.
You lead a good life. Any persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or admired or look up to? Any names come to mind?
Well, there's a lot of people I admire a lot. Carl Sagan. He's no longer with us, but he was a very influential person in my life.
Delightful human being.
I think of Eve Ensler, who wrote the Vagina Monologues, and now she has a group called V-Day. And her focus on women's equality and reproductive choice and that sort of thing resonates very strongly with me.
Are you a feminist?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Are you a libber?
Yes, yes. I don't see how we can make the world right until we get to the point where men and women are on the same level, same plane. And it seems like here it's happening, but if you look at what's happening in other parts of the world, like Africa, it's horrendous the way women are treated.
It seems to be going backwards or something. Okay. Someone said the difference between a feminist and a libber. A feminist says, "You've been doing this to me all of my life, and I'm not going to take it anymore. It's over." But a woman's libber would say, "You've been doing this to me all my life, and I'm going to do it to you for the rest of your life."
Well, I don't think that there should be a tit for tat, you know. I mean, men have been doing this for 10,000 years. I mean, I think it's really about giving women the respect they deserve and the opportunities that they deserve, and the right to be who they choose to be without, passing judgment. They should have that right.
Yeah. What's right with our country today? Give me a couple of three things that say what's right with our country, because I'm going to ask you what's wrong with our country.
Well, I think there's a tremendous potential here. People still believe they can achieve things. I think the young people are really being put in a very difficult spot at these days with the student loan debts and everything. But when you look at what we were able to achieve just by learning on our own with computers, there's still, if you really work at it, very little impediment to getting to where you want to be in relation to being in another country. I mean, this country, there still has opportunity that you don't get other places.
All right. So what's wrong with America then? We've only got 2 hours.
Well, I think primarily, the big problem with America is the political system is completely broken.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know whether you want to talk about that now or later, but it's.
We'll talk about it later, more later. Yeah.
I would say that's the biggest problem. Was we don't have a system of governance that works for the people. It should be working for the people, and it doesn't do that.
Yeah. How do we fix what's wrong with America today? How do we fix it?
Well,
just a few words, because we're going to talk some more about it in the second half.
I think people need to think about what's really happening in their lives and start to take charge and say, I need to be part of the solution. You can be part of the problem, or you can be part of the solution. And you have to educate yourself. You have to zero in on what's going on and figure out for yourself how you can be part of of taking us in the direction we need to be going.
So speaking about What's Wrong with America. You just finished a PSA kind of a production about Move to Amend. So we're going to put that up on the screen pretty soon when it's time. But what about this constitutional amendment we're talking about?
Well,
will that help to fix things?
Absolutely, and that's why, I mean, there's a lot of things I focused on in my life, but I've chosen at this point in my life to try to make a difference with our system of governance. And my determination is that the only answer is to get the money out of the system and the influence out of the system. And there are two things that have to happen in order to achieve that.
What's that?
One is you have to stop money being treated as speech. And the other one is corporations are currently treated as persons. Although there's never been a law that was passed that said that. It all goes back to the Supreme Court, and we can talk more about that later on if you want. But I think those two things are critical, and the reason I've chosen to give my attention to what Move to Amend is doing is their focus is very simple and narrow. It's a constitutional amendment, the 28th Amendment, that says corporations are not people and money is not speech. If you do that, the whole, everything else will rectify itself, will correct itself. But that has to happen before we start solving problems like climate change.
And we're going to talk about how that's going to happen later on. But in the meantime, can we put that up on the screen and show there it starts. This nation was conceived as a constitutional democracy.
We want democracy.
This means of, by, and for the people.
Every citizen, not just the fat cats.
Fairness. We just want fairness.
We don't have that.
Not even close.
Wall Street, big business, the media.
Too much corruption. Our government belongs to us.
We need government to be honest and transparent.
Elected politicians are supposed to represent us.
Instead, they're stuffing their pockets big time.
Legalized bribery, that's what I call it.
Corporations and the wealthy use their money and influence to shape the world they want, without regulation, without taxation on them, without regard for the consequences of their actions.
Corruption is the illness. There is a cure. It's a constitutional amendment that says this: as a citizen, you have one vote. It does not give you the right to use your money to pervert our political process.
The constitutional amendment must also say this: only flesh and blood human beings are people. Corporations are not people. They are accountable to the people and must earn the people's trust.
A group called Move to Amend has as its single mission the adoption of a new constitutional amendment.
A 28th Amendment that says very specifically that money is not speech and corporations are not people.
A 28th Amendment, that's what we need.
Whatever your cause, this is a big part of the solution.
It's going to happen.
Join us. Help to amend the Constitution.
If you care about the future, this is how you can make a difference.
We are Move to Amend.
We are Move to Amend.
We are Move to Amend.
We want a better world. This is how we make the difference.
Thank you. That was your production, and you did an excellent job.
Well, you were terrific in the thing too. Thank you for participating.
Yeah.
It's a little flawed technically, but I think the message is clear and profound, and we'll do better next time. I mean, this is the first time I've ever had to do everything myself. Before, I've always been able to hire people to work with me who knew a lot more than I did about the technical side of the process.
We find it just fine and excellent, and you're like my director tonight. Thank you, Billo, for filling in for my regular director, and he's a perfectionist too, so I can appreciate how you are. You two guys should get together and talk some more. So in the meantime, let's take a little break right now before we go into the second half of the show. Can we do that, Mr. Director? Okay, we're back again. Thanks for staying tuned. And for your viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. Tonight we're talking about videographer Geoff Holland. Sorry about that. My mind's 1,000 miles away. And we're going to continue on talking about more details of this man's life. So, can you tell us about your background, a little more about your background, and how did it lead you into video work?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how I could best impact the issues that I was concerned about. And it started with population. That was the first one. And nobody was talking about it. It was very distressing to see that there was no conversation at all going on about this. And so I came to the conclusion that you had to marshal the media somehow to get people's attention. And so that's how I moved in that direction. And so I started doing media work on population issues, and then it went into energy, renewable energy. With my particularly interest was hydrogen energy.
Hydrogen. You got a book there. Did you write a book?
Yeah, yeah. I wrote this book in 2007. That was after I actually did a 1-hour documentary about the same subject. And the focus basically was the fact that if we restructure our the way human society works, the smart way is to do it in according to principles of nature. You call it biomimicry. And of course, hydrogen is the most common substance in the universe.
Yes.
About 75% of everything in the universe is hydrogen, and you can use it as an energy source. Actually, you and I, as living organisms, run on hydrogen ions. So the idea is you can take hydrogen from all different sources. You can use fossil fuels and get hydrogen. You can use solar energy or wind energy or geothermal. Just about any kind of energy that generates electricity will allow you to generate hydrogen. And it's an energy carrier. It isn't an energy commodity or something like that you dig out of the earth. It's something that you have to manufacture.
It's
everywhere. So what we're looking at now is a future, and I actually thought it would we'd be seeing it sooner than we have, but the Europeans are really moving in a very aggressive way to adopt hydrogen as well as electricity. I mean, electric cars and that sort of thing. They're using it for their transportation systems, and it's something that will change life profoundly on the planet.
How would you get hydrogen to have it available for, as an energy source to generate electricity?
Yes, basically what you do, if you want to get it from hydrocarbons, which is the way they get it most of the time now, natural gas, they do a thing called reforming, and they split out the hydrogen ions, and they just use that for commercial hydrogen production these days. But ultimately, the best way is going to be electrolysis from water. It takes about 50 kilowatts of electricity and 2 gallons of gasoline, or 2 gallons of water, to produce the energy equivalent of 1 gallon of gasoline. So if you're able to generate electricity for 4 cents a kilowatt, you can produce hydrogen for $2 a gallon equivalent. And because hydrogen vehicles, for instance, are 40% more efficient than internal combustion engines running on gasoline, there's even a greater benefit from going that way. It's non-toxic. It's basically inexhaustible in supply. It really, along with the electricity that we use and we generate from renewable sources, it's going to be the way the world works in the future.
So in Europe they're using it?
If I could, I would. I wish I could buy a hydrogen. I've driven a number of different hydrogen fuel cell cars, but I've never. But there aren't really any that are commercially available yet. But
You've driven a few.
Yeah, I've driven probably 4 or 5 different ones from different manufacturers. All of the manufacturers are building these vehicles, and you know, but they aren't in commercial production.
They are all the manufacturers. General
they are
Motors
all
and
building.
Chrysler?
They all have fuel cell hydrogen vehicles, and the problem with getting hydrogen going now is we don't have the infrastructure to deliver it. But ultimately, what you're going to see is people are going to have on their homes, or like they may have a wind turbine if they're in a windy place, or solar panels, and the excess electricity that is produced during the day will be used to produce hydrogen that will power the home at night, and also can be used to power a person's automobile. And that's actually been doing. There's a fellow in New Jersey that's been doing that for about the last decade.
So how is it stored in the vehicle? Liquid?
Right now, compressed hydrogen is the best way. There's a couple of different ways you can do it, and you can do liquid hydrogen, but you have to cool it tremendously in order to liquefy it. So that's a really expensive process. And the easiest way is with compressed hydrogen. And you can actually now the vehicles they can get up to 300 miles of range on a tank of compressed hydrogen, and it maybe takes 5 or 6 minutes to fill the tank when you pull into a filling station. So the process is going to be very easy for people to assimilate when the time comes.
Why don't we have it available now?
Well, the Europeans are already going there. I mean, they have buses, they have all kinds of vehicles that run on hydrogen, and they're spending billions on the infrastructure. So the Europeans are going to have it before us, and the Chinese probably will have it before us, and maybe the Japanese.
That sounds crazy. Why aren't crazy. Why are we leading the pack?
You know, we should be leading the pack, but unfortunately, the energy policy in this country is controlled by big oil and coal, and to some extent nuclear. And you know, the people that make the policy are all from those industries, and it's going to be. I think unfortunately, it's going to happen here, but we're going to be getting the technology to a large extent from other countries because we're not doing what we should be doing to prepare for this.
Let's shift gears for a bit. A population issue. You're concerned. You talked earlier about. There's too many darn people on the planet.
Yeah.
And at the rate we're going, there's going to be far more than there is now.
Well, you know, it's kind of a. Right now, we're in a transition period. In 1950, the total fertility rate for the world was about 5 per fertile woman, and now it's down to 2.36. In the U.S., it's 1.8. And that's below 2 is the replacement level.
Yes, of course.
So that's good. But there are many places in other parts of the world where the culture combined with the lack of access to contraception and so forth has created a tremendous growth. And I'll give you one example. The Congo. People probably have heard about the ugly mess that's going on over there with the constant war that's going on. Despite the fact that they have an ongoing genocide, the population is growing at 3% annually. And it's a no-win situation because they're basically consuming the living resources over their landscape in order to survive. I mean, the animals particularly are very vulnerable to being eaten because there's nothing else, not enough other food to eat.
What do we need to do about what's going on in the Congo?
First of all, I think we have to recognize that women have a very important role in rectifying the situation, and the cultures in many parts of Africa is still very dominant, male-oriented, and it's pretty ugly the way women get treated. And I think that we have to get to a point where that changes. But you can't impose it. They have to make the choice themselves. And I think that's the success stories in Africa where things are transitioning, like the Cameroon, are being driven by people who are facilitating it by helping them, the Cameroonians, to make their own choices about changing their culture and moving into the future. And I think that's the way it has to work all over Africa ultimately, and other places in the world where this population is still growing.
So, should America be the leader in that regard? America pretends it's a leader in every other regard.
Well, we aren't the leader, unfortunately. We are giving some money to it, but not what we should be giving. And there's a lot of leadership coming from Europe to help this process. But in terms of the population growth, most of it is happening in Africa, some places in the Middle East, some places in Asia, and a few places in Latin America. But the world is moving in a good direction. We just have to do it faster, because we're at 7.24 million right now. We could be at 10 or 12 billion by the end of this century, and that's a disaster. That's a nightmare to think about.
Oh, let's shift again. You did a video called "The Cost of Cool." The Cost of Cool. That's an interesting title.
Yeah, well, a part of the population issue is consumption. And the way population works here, I mean, is we have 5% of the world's population, but we consume 25% of the world's resources in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So we created this video as a way to help young people understand that the forces that work in their lives, that the constant marketing and products to them and so forth, is driving this process. And if we are going to make a contribution to putting us in a sustainable way in the future, this has to change. So we did this Cost of Cool as a film for young people, and it's being used in high schools all over the United States, and I guess some universities too.
So you're talking about, to be cool, you have to be smart and do things according to the way the system says you should do them.
Well,
so that you look good. Is it cool looking good?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, they get these signals all the time that you're not useful or worthy unless you are branded in some way. I mean, you're carrying around brands and or buying certain products or using certain products.
And supporting the capitalist system.
Right. So that's the cost of cool, being cool. The price we pay is the destruction of the environment that we depend on. This is the only place we have. The Earth is the only place we have. We can't send people to the moon, or maybe a few, but it wouldn't be a very pleasant place to live. You're not going to put a subdevelopment there, and certainly not to Mars. We have to take care of this place we have, and that's part of what Cost of Cool was all about.
How does amending the Constitution help in this regard?
Well, the media, to a large extent, has been taken over by big corporations and big money, and so you can't depend on the corporate media to give you messages that will help you move in the right direction. So you have to get away from that. And how do you sort of neutralize the kind of corporate power that is used to manipulate the public opinion? The way you have to do that is ultimately to change the Constitution. I think I said earlier, in this country, money is not speech, is not something that was ever passed as a law. But it's treated as legal precedent because of what the courts have done. And same thing with corporate personhood.
So you want money out of the political process?
Not entirely, but it has to be done in a way that a small number of people aren't in a position to dictate policy on the issues that they're concerned about. There's a billionaire casino owner right now who is spending unbelievable amounts of money to influence the political process because he doesn't like online gambling, because it cuts into his profits. It's hard to understand the motivation for somebody like that. This guy is probably close to 80 years old. Why would he do something like that? And I mean, you're a psychologist. You tell me, what is it about people that makes them behave that way?
Uncontrolled greed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to agree with that.
Doesn't take a big PhD to know that. Yeah.
Yes.
So what we need to do is have regulation or some sort of control over these characters.
Well, you can create regulations if you get the money out of the system so you can elect people who are not going into the political process just so they can feed at the trough. There's a whole level of society, of sycophants that are only there to feed at the trough and serve the people at the top.
We're in a circular discussion now, you know.
Yeah.
So what do we need to do then to get the money out of the political process?
Well,
move to amend?
Yes, move to amend. I mean, ultimately, it's quite clear that if you have a constitutional amendment that says money is not speech, that allows the laws that govern the election process, the campaign process, to be shaped so that individuals with huge amounts of money aren't in a position to take over the process like they are right now. And the same thing with corporations. I mean, corporations use this thing they call personhood, which they claim, but they've never actually been given through the law. They use it to manipulate the political process and basically shape the world that they want.
Well, it seems if you have a different Supreme Court.
Boy, you got it right there. You hit the nail on the head.
How do we do that?
Well, you're not going to. The Supreme Court judges are there for life. So basically, the way you do that is you move. Ultimately, you get to the point where you can replace the people who are creating the problem with people who are going to be working more for the people.
How do we do that?
I think by electing the right people to the presidency, electing the right people to Congress, and so forth. And there's just a lot of people in Congress that really have no business being there because they aren't interested in serving the public's interest.
One more. How do we do that?
Again, it comes down to changing the Constitution. I think ultimately that has to be the answer. You know, there are some people who are actually pushing constitutional amendment to deal with specifically with the legal judgments by the Supreme Court that created the problem. Like they want to roll back McCutcheon versus FEC and Citizens United and Buckley versus Vallejo and so forth.
Yeah.
But you know, if you do that, that only takes you back to the way it was about 15 years ago. It was still egregiously corrupt. That's not going to change anything. The way you change things is go to the foundation that all of this is built on. If you can get to the point where corporations are treated just like they should be, as chartered organizations that are accountable to the people, then you don't have this problem. And Europe works that way. If you go to Germany, the board of directors in Germany are not just people that have a stake in the profits that the corporation makes. You've got labor people on the boards. You've got the members of the local community where the corporations are located on their boards. So the decisions that a corporation makes in those instances are much more tuned to what's best for all involved. That's where we need to go.
Sounds like we need to have some sort of a way to regulate wealth in our country.
Well, you know, the country wasn't doing so bad when actually I think the highest income tax rate was 90% at one point when Eisenhower was in office.
That's hard to believe, isn't it?
It is hard to believe. But now you've got a situation where a corporate CEO can make 400 or 500 times as much as the average employee. That's insane.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, they've done a very good job of manipulating the system, using their political influence so that they can feed at the trough and have a very good time. And they're not going to go away easily. They have to be, the public has to get involved and resist very aggressively in order for this to change.
Is our country heading toward a revolution?
I don't know. I mean, one of the things
I don't know either.
it's really scary is the fact that they're militarizing the police in this country to such a degree. And I don't know where that comes from, but it's a very frightening prospect to think that
they're preparing
the
for the revolution.
Yes,
they're preparing for the revolution. There's been revolutions in the past.
Yes, and again, if you look what happened in Europe, like in the Czechoslovakia, for instance, when Václav Havel came around, the people rallied around him, and there were tanks in the street from the military, but they still prevailed because enough people were willing to put themselves on the line to say, we want our country back. And I think ultimately that's what we have to do here, and it's about building constituencies. We have to build constituencies of people who are aware and will focus on the right thing, and that's why I'm trying to do this with helping Move to Amend.
Let's shift over to something going on right now. It's fairly new, and it's a little different than what we've got planned to talk about. What's going on right now in Iraq? Can we talk about that for a moment?
Well, that's an ugly situation. I mean,
yeah.
We never should have gone there in the first place. I mean, that whole situation was fabricated. It's built on a lie, and we were told numerous times it was going to cost us virtually nothing. There was that the Iraqis were going to love us, but there were other people who the media was not listening to who were also saying, you got Shiites and Sunnis, and they haven't liked each other for 1,000 years or whatever. It's still that way. And when Saddam Hussein was there, he was an evil SOB, but there was a sort of a stabilization of the relationship between the Shiites and the Sunnis. That was completely disrupted, and now what you see is that we're reaping what we sowed. I mean, we started this thing and made a mess, and I think it was all about oil. See, if we got off of oil, we wouldn't have these problems.
Now, was Saddam Hussein more evil than the American leadership that got us into Vietnam?
I have to question that.
How come the people in Iraq, their ongoing level of living and satisfaction with their system is entirely different than it is now under Saddam Hussein, this horrible, beastly dictator? I need to step back and look a little more objectively in what's going on. But anyhow, that's my soapbox I'm on now.
Yeah, I think we're just beginning to see what's the repercussions from that very, very bad policy, and I think it's shameful that the people who created the problem are now emerging on television and being touted as experts who are trying to shame us into going back in and investing again. That thing cost $4 trillion of American wealth. Probably at least 1 million Iraqi lives, 5,000 American lives. And the military-industrial complex made a fortune with all the equipment they had to replace that was destroyed in that war. We know how if we take the time to understand these situations, it isn't difficult. I mean, the evidence is there.
But I'm not sure the corporate media will give us the
That's the problem.
Evidence,
the corporate media won't give it to us, and I mean this is why instead of talking to people who have something critical to say about what happened when the Iraqi war started, they're dredging up these people like Wolfowitz and Dick Cheney and letting them have their say about how terrible the president is because he's not dragging us back into that.
How about Putin? What kind of a character do you think Putin is? Do you think he's more evil than the leadership in Washington?
I think he's just trying to show off. I mean, you've seen the guy walking around without his shirt. He's got a rifle, or he's riding a horse like he's a superhero or something. I think he's just got some kind of a. You're a psychologist. I ask you. That looks to me like somebody's got some kind of a ego thing that needs to be satisfied. I can understand to some extent the Crimea, taking back the Crimea, because that was part of Russia traditionally, and while it was still part of the Soviet Union, they gave it to the Ukraine. So.
I think they got to you. I think the media has gotten to you. They've demonized Putin so that you don't look at the inadequacies and the misbehavior of the people in Washington.
Oh no, please don't misunderstand me. You asked me about what he was all about. I mean, I just think, in fact, psychologically, that's where he's coming from. I don't think he's a real threat to anybody over the long term. But you have to wonder about people in Washington who, at the drop of the hat, they want to go to war again.
Why is that?
Because they're getting lots of campaign money and support from the military-industrial conflict and big business and oil. Iraq, the invasion of Iraq was always about oil, and now we have a situation where the oil supply is threatened. I just read that the Sunni militants have taken over the biggest oil refinery in Iraq, and I'm sure that's making some of these big oil people apoplectic.
Have you heard of let's you and him fight? That's the ultimate game. That's what America does. Any country that seems to be getting enough of the wherewithal to resist American domination, then the CIA goes in and arranges to have them fight among themselves so that they don't present a threat to American dominion.
I think if you look at the CIA, they don't have a very good record of really serving the interests of the people of this country. They've been gone rogue many times over the last 4 or 5 decades.
Let's switch over pretty quickly, because we didn't talk about animal rights and biodiversity protection. You want to talk a little bit about animal rights?
Yes, ultimately, I mean, what we need to work for is a world that's sustainable, where what we use does not go beyond what the planet is able to provide, and we're well beyond that right now. You know, we should be living on the interest that's generated by the biological wealth of the planet, but we're not only eating up all the interest, we're eating up the capital as well, and with deforestation and the strip mining of the oceans and so forth, and that has to change, and we have to get to where we live sustainably within our means, and I think again that's where we move to amend is really ultimately the answer that we all have to sort of focus on and work on. But you asked about animal rights. It pains me that we kill 150 billion animals every year. The humans do for consumption or whatever we want to use them for, and a lot of it they've been commoditized. Mm-hmm. And I think about the way indigenous peoples traditionally treated the animals that they took for food, and they revered them, and they didn't cause them to suffer or treat them disrespectfully. But animals are treated terribly disrespectfully. You look at chickens. The chickens that we can buy very cheaply in the supermarket, most of them probably have had their beaks cut off, and their feet have been ruined by standing on wire all day, every day.
Life, yeah.
In very tight little cages. And I mean, I'm not suggesting that we all need to become vegetarians. I'm saying that we could all get along eating less animal product. And we can certainly find a way to treat the animals that we raise for our own consumption better than the way we do it now.
Yeah. Climate change, global warming, is that a fantasy, or do you think it's really happening?
Oh, it's absolutely. The physics are simple. There's no controversy if you just look at the physics. 97% of all climate scientists say the same thing, and the other 3%, probably most of those are on the payroll of ExxonMobil and companies like that. So there's no question about climate change. We know what's happening. I mean, the evidence is there. And if we don't start getting real about it and doing something about it, I mean, this is part of the reason that we chose not to have children, because it's the future is ugly if we allow things to go business as usual.
How long before the beaches of Florida disappear because of the oceans rising?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, 50 years, maybe. I mean, there's a place right now in the Pacific called Kiribati that it's a country, an island country, that is basically gone. I mean, the people have had to emigrate to other places because the land does not stay above water long enough for them to really survive. The Maldives off the coast of Spain is the same way. And what's the crazy thing about that is the hotel owners in the Maldives are in denial, and they threw out the president because he wanted to do something. He wanted to, and so that's the kind of mentality you're dealing with. People who are focused on profit. It's a sociopathy that's really ugly. I mean, if you're only interested in profit and you can't see the consequences at all, that's real trouble.
Now, do you see why I coined that term, specieside?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're doing it to ourselves.
And if we don't reverse it, it's going to be happening, and I don't know how long it'll be, maybe a couple hundred years before some...
I'm optimistic, Don. I think it's going to happen. We're going to turn this around. I don't think we're going to do it without a lot of pain. There's probably going to be a lot of people that are going to suffer, but eventually we're going to get with the program and do what we have to do, because there are answers. There's technical answers to almost every problem that we have. And it's exciting. I mean, it would revitalize the economy if we just embrace some of these things, like hydrogen energy, for instance. But unfortunately, the people who are in charge are beholden to those who have big bucks, who are only interested in continuing to line their pockets with ever more.
All right, I'm aware of the time running out here, and I wonder if you have some message that you want to give to the viewers. Look in camera 2 for you, and 3, and you can tell the viewers what you want to tell them.
Well, I guess my message is thoughtful people generally have issues that they're concerned about. And I mean, I've been concerned about clean energy and about human overpopulation, reproductive choice and women's equality, because I think getting us on the right track with women being treated as equal is very important.
Tell the viewers.
But ultimately, we all have to get on the same page about doing something about changing the way our government works. And Move to Amend, in my estimation, is the way to do it. It's a very simple paradigm that they've created. 2 things. Corporations are not people, and money is not speech. Mm-hmm. If you can change those 2 things, everything else will fall into place. That's what we have to do. So if people don't know about it already, they should educate themselves. You can just type Move to Amend into a search engine and learn about it there. Get on board and do something and become active on this issue. That's the way we'll get to the place where we need to go.
All right, we need to stop because it's about time for us to shut down before my director yells at me again. And keep your pens and pencils handy, because you may want to jot down something that we'll show you in the closing credits. I invite you to give us feedback, both positive and negative. It's time for some closing PSAs. There's the broadcast schedule when you can see the Dr. Don Show. And the next PSA we have coming up is to watch my shows on the web. Google Don Baham YouTube. Don Baham YouTube. There's hundreds of shows on that I've recorded through the years. Some very interesting and some more interesting than others. All of them great. Next PSA we have coming up is, here we go. End corporate personhood. We got to save our country. Go to www.movetoamend.org, movetoamend.org, and learn how we can amend the Constitution to take our country back. Next, we have PSA coming up. One more. I think the Alliance for Democracy, a great organization I belong to. There's the websites for the national and the local Portland, Oregon website where you can learn about the Alliance for Democracy. It's a great organization. You want to join us and be part of saving America from the greedheads. Do we have another one? To watch populist dialogues? Go to www.afd-pdx.org and click on AFD videos to learn how to do that. And remember, KFC and not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind. Be friendly. And be charitable to you too. And you too. And you too. You too. Thanks again. See you next time. Good night.